Morning, everyone. It's good to see you this morning. It's a beautiful day God has blessed us with. And it's certainly good to be together to study this morning. I believe one of our elders will make this point later on this morning, but I just want to personally thank all of those who took a part in the fair effort, whether you worked a booth or if you helped put materials together, assemble materials, or if you just prayed about the effort. If you took a part in that in any way at all, thank you so much. God bless you. It is certainly a blessing to be with a group of disciples who care about the lost and want to win souls for Jesus. So thank you to all of you who played a part in that in any way at all. We're going to be on page number 28. We want to finish lesson 7 very quickly this morning and then dive into lesson 8, believe it or not. But after today, we'll have 3 classes left until the final quarter of the year starts. I cannot believe we're almost at the final quarter of the year. This year has flown by, it seems like. But that is where we're at. So we want to be on page 28 in the workbook and going back to Joshua chapter 10. We want to finish up Joshua 10. Before we do that, I want to ask Sean if he wouldn't mind leading us in a word of prayer. Would you mind doing that, buddy? Thank you, Sean. Okay, so where we are at this morning, remember from last time, an alliance has been formed between the kings of the south. And why did they form this alliance? Do you remember what the text told us? They formed this alliance against who specifically? The Gibeonites. And why did they form that alliance against the Gibeonites? What had the Gibeonites done wrong in their eyes? They made a treaty with Israel. So they are trying to send a message that no one needs to be following in their footsteps. They want to intimidate the Gibeonites and intimidate anyone else from making a treaty with Israel. And so this alliance forces Israel to do what? What does Israel do? They go into action. They go to battle to defend the Gibeonites. And what does the Lord have to say about this? Does the Lord endorse what Israel does or not? Absolutely. He tells them to keep going. In fact, he tells them that I am going to give your enemies into your hand. In fact, the Lord fought for them. Remember, there were hail stones that came upon the enemies that actually killed more of the Canaanites than Israel did. So the Lord is fighting for his people, and not only does he send hailstones upon them, but a miracle takes place. One of the great miracles of the Bible. I mean, every miracle is great, but this one to me is very impressive. What was the miracle that occurred that we talked about last time? The sun stood still. And the sun stood, and in what way would that help the Israelites? By God extending the day. In what way would that help Israel? The enemies, they can't hide. They can't go into fortified cities and hide from Israel. God extends the day so they can experience victory, complete victory on this day against the kings who had come against them. And so that brings us now to where we are at this morning, question 7 on page 28. The kings, the 5 kings who came against Israel, where do they flee to? And what did Joshua do when he found them? And why does he do this? So, First part, where did the kings flee to, according to what the text says? Going down to, back to Joshua chapter 10. Where did they flee to, according to verse 16? Makeda, that's right. So as we go look at the map here, we see the battle actually takes place between Gibeon and Makeda. And the kings flee southwest to Makeda. And where do they hide in Makeda? They hide in a cave in Makeda. All right? So Joshua is eventually going to find them there. And before I get to that, let me just point out a few things I think we need to mention here. First, as far as the kings go, they're trapped in a cave, right? In fact, when Joshua finds them, what does he do to trap them in the cave? He finds out the cave they're in, but what does he do specifically to make sure they don't go anywhere? Puts a big stone in front of it. You're not going anywhere. And then they go fight some more. They're going to come back and deal with them later. But they go and they continue to fight. Now, when they come back after they defeat more of the Canaanites who are also fleeing, more of the army of the southern portion of the Canaanites, Joshua comes back to the cave, and what does he do? Put it in order. What does he do? It's the first thing he does with these kings. He opened the cave up. And he come back, they open the cave, they bring them out, and then what? Before then. Ah, interesting. He pushed his feet. In fact, he doesn't do it. He has the leaders of his army, the other leaders of the army, the chief captains. They come out and they place their feet. He says, place your feet on the neck of these men. Does that remind you of anything else in the Bible? You being the good Bible students that you are, when you read that, that should have immediately brought something in your mind. One of the most important chapters in the whole Bible has a reference to that. The hub of the Bible has a reference to this. What is it? What chapter am I talking about? Should be one of the most important chapters you've ever studied. One of the chapters somebody probably looked at with you when they were bringing you to the Lord. What was it? Peter, on the day of, preaches the gospel. And does he make a reference to that anywhere in his sermon? Go back to Acts 2. This is one of the most important chapters. If there's ever a chapter you want to have mastered down in the New Testament, it's Acts 2. Acts 2 is the hub of the Scriptures. Everything before it is pointing to it. Everything after is pointing back to it. Look at Acts 2. Tell me if you can find a reference to this anywhere as he preaches about Jesus. Ah, that's it, Dennis. Acts 2. Let's look at 34 and 35. As Peter is preaching about the identity of Jesus, he says, for it was not David who ascended into heaven, but he himself says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make what? Your enemies a footstool under your feet. There it is, right there. In ancient times, that is exactly what kings would do. Whenever they would defeat another king in his army, they would bring out the king who was been defeated, and they would place their foot on their neck. This is something that was done in ancient times between victorious kings, what victorious kings would do to defeated kings. And why would they do that? Why would a king place his foot on the neck of another king? What is that designed to symbolize? Total dominance. Submission. This king has lost. This king is mine. I have defeated this man. That's what victorious kings would do in ancient times. That's what it was supposed to signify when Joshua did it. It was supposed to signify that these kings belong to us. We have defeated these men. God has brought us to victory. God will bring us to victory against every one of these kind of kings. That's what it's supposed to signify, total domination. Now, in reference to Jesus, what does this mean in reference to Jesus? Going back to Acts 2:35. What is he trying to make with that point? What do you think? And yes, and not just Satan. Satan is part of it, but he says what about the enemies? All of them. That includes Satan. That also includes what else? Man. And in fact, that's exactly, Dominique, in the context, we don't talk about this enough, but that is exactly one of the motivating factors why all those people got baptized on that day. They heard that, and they did not want to be an enemy of Jesus. They did not want to be in position when symbolically his foot would be on their necks. They didn't want to be against Jesus, the conquering king. So you have Satan, you have any person who goes against Jesus, and you have death ultimately too, right? So you have Satan, you have men who go against Jesus, you have death. Jesus is the ultimate conquering king, and he will reign as king until all enemies have been placed under his feet. That is a reference going back to Joshua. You see that? So the kings have the feet of Joshua's generals or his captains placed on their necks. Okay, so after that symbolism is made, then what happens? Going back to Joshua 10, what happens to the men? Verse 26, what happens to them? Joshua 10:26. Yep, they hung them. They hung them on 5 trees, 5 kings for 5 trees. They hung them there until the evening. So they executed these men. The conquest is continuing. Now you have the 5 kings who have come against Israel to send a message. Guess who sent the real message? God has. They wanted to send a message, but God sent the real message. The real message was all of these people will suffer. They're going to be defeated by my people. God will win. So anybody have any comments about question 7 before we move on? Yes, sir, Jeff. Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. The word of mouth, yep. That's exactly what it's designed to do, to send fear throughout Canaan. And I think it definitely is doing that. Absolutely. Anyone else? Comments or questions before we move on? Okay. Oh, yes. Yes, Lauren.
And I think this is an important point about God, too. This is a little cringy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's intense.
That's very intense.
But if you mess with God,
that's what happens.
He's going to step up until he gets his message.
He will totally dominate you.
He will make sure you get it.
Exactly.
Even if it makes people around go, ooh.
Yes. Yes. And that's what the Old Testament is all about. And God is totally unbiased when it comes to sending that message, even in the case of Israel. Absolutely. So we now go to question 8, and we're going to go through this one pretty fast. It should be pretty easy to answer this one. So these 5 kings are defeated. The campaign continues. Let's go in order. What are the places that Joshua conquered? What did he do in each of these places? So first part, let's go through it place by place. Where does he go? Give me the first one. We start with Makeda. Okay, then where do we go? Libnah. So we're going here. Then where? Lachish. Then we go where? Eglon. Then where else? Hebron. That's right. Then we go into Debir. And then Kadesh Barnea, which will be more to the south. The point is, we're going from city to city, taking them out. And when they go from city to city, what are they doing in each one of these places according to what the scripture says? What are they doing in each place? Killing the people. They're killing all the people. Killing the kings. They're totally wiping things out as they go through. So the point is, they're totally conquering the southern part of Canaan. That's the point. God is keeping his promise to his people. And so question 9, how was Joshua able to do this? And what can we learn from that? So how was Joshua able to conquer? I mean, these people who are just 40 years or so removed from slavery, how are they able to take all of these strong cities? God is with them. Don't overlook that. I mean, that is a powerful point. This is a great demonstration of the power of our God. God's taken these people here who haven't been that far removed from slavery, and he goes from place to place in cities that have been established for hundreds of years. and wiping them out. Now, what's something when you read about that, as you read that, what is something that you think we can learn from that as disciples that can help us today? Is there anything we can take away from that? Absolutely. Whatever enemy you got in your life, whatever problem you got in your life, if you have God on your side, you can overcome it. You can get through it. Yes, sir, Brother Matt. Go ahead, sir.
I agree with all of that, but also part of what's going on here is these are the same cities that all combine together to support this big southern army that got butchered.
Yep.
The reason why they're able to roll over all of these cities so quickly is because all the defenders are dead.
Yep, that's exact. And isn't that, it kind of reminds me, maybe kind of backwards a little bit, but I think we saw, at least in my understanding, something similar with AI. You take the defenders out of the city, and the people, they're vulnerable. And I mean, they kind of brought this on themselves, obviously through God's providence. But the soldiers are dead, kings are dying, so what do you think is going to happen? I mean, what do you think is going to happen to everybody else? That's a good point. That's a rich point there. Go ahead.
And really, it's because the Canaanites are in a lose-lose situation. If they come out and fight the Israelites in the open country, they get beaten. But if they stay in their cities, they get Jericho.
Yep. Either way, they're going to lose.
Yeah, and that's because God is, as you said, God is fighting.
Absolutely.
And they're not going to be able to stand.
And another thing I like about this is how Israel is making sure they trust God and do exactly what he says in the whole process. Have you noticed that? I mean, and that's something else that we're going to see quite a bit, is the scripture specifically says that they do all the Lord commanded. They're very different than the past generation, right? And very different from what you're going to see with Israel moving forward. These people trust in the Lord. They're doing what he says. And a lesson from that is when you do that, God will always lead you to victory. He will bless you. Yes, sir, Mr. Smith. Go ahead, sir. Yep. They paid the consequence. I think about even the treaty with the Gibeonites. And thankfully, God could still use that to their benefit, but that was a blunder on their part because they didn't do what God said. Absolutely. Good point. Anyone else before we move on? Any other points? Dr. Clifford, yes, sir. Yep. And unfortunately, you know, their parents and grandparents don't get to experience this. They could have experienced this. But they didn't listen to God. They didn't do what he says, and God wasn't going to compromise for them. God is so powerful that he's going to fulfill his promises one way or another. Either it's going to be with you or it's going to be with someone in the future who will do what he says. So that's a good point. Excellent point. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, ultimately, in the big scheme of things, these people brought this on themselves. God is a holy God. He's a just God. He's a great God, and he doesn't have to put up with us. And could God have put up with them? Well, I guess, but he wasn't going to. And these people, they brought this on themselves because they rejected him. They had rejected him for hundreds and hundreds of years till their sins became full. And they brought about the judgment of God. And the same is true with us. If we don't serve God and do what he says, we'll bring about the judgment of God in our lives, whether in this life, but most certainly in the next life. So that's an excellent point there. Yes, sir. Right. Right. Absolutely. It's exactly right. It's the same principle. Good point. So after they defeat these kings and these people, where do they always return? Gilgal. They go back to Gilgal, the base of operations. And so let's now move on to Joshua 11. We need to move on to Joshua 11 now because there are some very important things we need to talk about in this chapter. So I'm going to see if somebody can can help me. Doug, would you mind helping me this morning, sir? Would you mind reading? We're going to read this whole chapter, and it's not very long. Doug, would you mind reading the first 15 verses, and I can take it from there, of Joshua chapter 11, please. Thus Joshua took all that land, the hill country and all the Negev, all the land of Goshen, the lowland, the Arabah, the hill country of Israel and its lowland, from Mount Helek that rises towards Seir, even as far as Baal-gad in the valley of Lebanon at the foot of Mount Hermon. And he captured all their kings and struck them down and put them to death. Joshua waged war a long time with all these kings. There was not a city which made peace with the sons of Israel except the Hivites living in Gibeon. They took them all in battle. For it was of the Lord to harden their hearts, to meet Israel in battle in order that he may utterly destroy them, that they may receive no mercy, but that they might destroy them just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Then Joshua came at that time and cut off the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from the hill, all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. There was no Anakim left in the land of the sons of Israel, only in Gaza and Gath, and in Ashdod some remained. So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance to Israel according to the divisions by their tribes. Thus the land had rest from war. That is a very, very powerful summary of a lot going on over a long period of time in one chapter. So let's go through this and start with question 1. I want you to carefully look at the text and provide your answers. First, the king of Hazor. Hazor is going to be a very important city to notice, and we've moved now. We've moved from the south. The south belongs to Israel. This is all Israel's now. What is east of the Jordan belongs to Israel. Remember, they did that in the time of Moses. You read that in Numbers. Now, what is south belongs to Israel. The only thing left is what? The north of the west of the Jordan. That's it. So, the king of Hazor, what did he do once he heard about the Israelites' conquest of the south? What did he do? Summarize it. Yeah, he said we got to come together. There's a whole list of people here, a whole list of areas, cities, and notice you have all these different kinds of people who are among the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites. I mean, they're going through the land, but we're talking specifically here about the north part. He calls for one big army. Okay? And look at verse 4. I think verse 4 really summarizes it. When you have this alliance that's being formed due to what has happened in the south, it says they came out, they and all their armies with them, as many people as what? Sand is on the seashore. See, that's hyperbole there. The idea there's a lot of people. Okay? Because when you go to the sand on the seashore, is there a lot of sand on the seashore? Absolutely. Can't even count it. So it's got a lot of people. All these kings, having agreed to meet, came and encamped together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. Now, Merom, where would that be? Has anybody done any research on that to know where Merom is? Yeah, well, it's in the north. Yeah, but it would be specifically going between this little place right here would be the Dead Sea. Not the Dead Sea, I'm sorry. I can't remember what the name of this lake is. But this right here would be the Sea of Galilee. So you're talking about an area right here. Right in here is where there's Merom. That's where that body of water would be. So they're having battle. But they're having battle in that area there. And let me just say this before we move on to the next question. This is a huge army, and it's important to understand. I mean, we've been very impressed with what Israel has done so far with the help of God. But let me tell you something. They hadn't seen anything like they're about to see now. Yeah, they've taken down Jericho, and that was very impressive. And they've taken down all these kings from the south. But what they're about to face now would be their biggest challenge. So, yes, they trusted God, but they're going to have to trust Him even more so now. This is a massive army coming against Israel with, mind you, leading the charge. It's the most important city in Israel. I mean, Jericho was important, but Hazor is the city. It's an even more significant city than Jericho. That's why they can form this. You understand that? Hazor is a very important city. And it was, in fact, the largest city in Israel at this time. I mean, it was the Memphis of Israel. So that's what we're looking at here. This is their biggest challenge yet. Okay? So, that can be very intimidating, even after all these conquests. So what does the Lord do to Joshua? What assurance does He give him? What assurance does the Lord give Joshua? And tell me where you find it at. Yes. In verse 6, what assurance does He give him? What does He say to him? Don't be afraid. Look at it. Don't be afraid because of them. Because of them. I know there's a lot of them. And I know this is your biggest challenge yet. And it can be very intimidating to see all these people who are about to come against you. They're really now about to give you their best shot. Don't be afraid because of them. For tomorrow, at this time, I will deliver all of them slain before Israel. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. And let's talk about that second part. Hamstring the horses, cripple the horses, and burn the chariots with fire. Why not hold on to that stuff and use it for the rest of the battle? Why are we going to cripple the horses? Why are we going to burn the chariots? We can use that stuff. Y'all got it now. Now you're thinking. This is something you find David doing too in his battles. God gives David same instructions when he goes against enemies. To cripple the horses, burn the chariots. The point is, we're not going to depend on chariots. We're not going to depend on horses. We're going to depend on the Lord. That's the point. So that's why we're going to cripple the horses. We're going to even burn the chariots. We could use this stuff, but we're not, because the battle belongs to the Lord. That's the point. So before we go on to question 2, did anybody else see something there that stood out to you about that first question? About what the Lord is telling them, I'm going to give these people into your hands. This is going to be your biggest challenge yet. And not only will you have victory, but you're not even going to use their resources. We're going to continue with the battle with me leading the way. Yes, ma'am. I think that's to send a message. I think that was to send a message that we're not even going to leave. Not even going to leave these horses, and they didn't kill them, which they could have, but they crippled them to send the message of we don't need this stuff. We don't need these things at all. You look, I know there's a lot of animal lovers here, but that's what the Lord said, and that's what they had to do. And it was to send the message of we're not going to use these resources. In fact, not only will we not use it, we're going to make it so we can't use it. Yeah, well, that's too. Well, that too, yeah. Yes, sir.
And I think the issue is that if you have all these healthy horses running around, as long as they're there, there's going to be a temptation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Take them and start relying on them instead of relying
We're going to make it so that not only are we not going to use them, we're going to make it so we can't use them. We can't use them. We're going to be forced to depend on the Lord. Good point. Good observation. Did somebody else have something? Yes. Yeah, then that's an interesting point there. In fact, there's a question as we move on that's going to have to do with that, and the lack of wisdom behind what they're doing. So that's an excellent point. We're going to say more about that in just a moment. Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Dominique.
One of my favorite verses, there's a verse in Psalm 20 says some trust in chariots and some in horses.
Psalm 20.
Psalm 20 verse 7, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we remember the name of the Lord our God. They have bowed down and fallen, but we have risen and stand upright. Save, Lord, may we answer the King. May the King answer us when we call.
And who wrote that one? Ah, there you go. Yeah, same thing. You know, David says we don't trust in horses. We don't trust in chariots. And it's one thing to say that. It's another thing to do something to make it so that you're incapable of using these things. And you know, this is very interesting. We're finding in Joshua, but David did the same thing. And the point is trusting in the Lord. We're not going to trust in horses and chariots. And it also reminds me of Gideon. Remember Gideon, where God wants to dwindle the army down? To what? To how many people? 300. He went from thousands. I mean, I think it was like 10,000, maybe more. I can't remember exactly. But he went from thousands down to what? 300. Why did God dwindle the army down like that? What was he doing? What was the message he was sending? What was he trying to get Israel to do? Depend on him. That's the point. That's the point. That's the point of all of this, to depend in the Lord. So that's what we have going on here. Yes, ma'am.
Another point that I see is in chapter 10 about the same place.
Yes.
The first thing that God tells them before going into battle, or tells Joshua, is do not fear. It stands out to me again that fear can cripple us.
Yes.
God's word more than anything.
And let's talk about that a little bit, because that's an interesting point. You know, you think about the battle we're waging and the battle for souls we're engaged in, right? So many religious groups, if you think about it, really don't trust the Lord when it comes to evangelism. They put their trust in gimmicks. We have to, you know, have sports. We got to do all these other things to bring people in, pizza, donuts, karate. We got to do all these different things to bring people in, because the gospel, that's not going to cut it. We're not going to grow as a church if we just depend on the gospel. Really? Where's your trust then? Your trust in gimmicks. Your trust really in yourself and what you can come up with, when God's plan to draw people to him and essentially for local churches to grow is what? It's the gospel. It's simple teaching and preaching about Jesus and how he died on the cross for our sins and was raised from the dead, and we need to do what he says. That's been God's power to draw men to him for 2,000 years. And that's where we got to put our trust. When we put our trust in gimmicks and all these other things to draw people into the Lord's body, we're no different than Israel. They had kept those horses and kept those chariots when God says, cripple them. Trust in me. God's drawing power is the gospel. And to this day, God's people still have to make a choice. Are we going to trust what God has told us to do to experience victory? Are we going to do it his way? Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. And that's another thing churches are compromising on to draw people in. The gospel is just not good enough. When God says it is good enough, it's all you need. When you just teach it and preach it, you're putting your trust in me. And you're drawing people to me the way I want them to be drawn to me. So that's a good point, Janice. I'm glad you brought that up. That is thinking outside the box there. That's good. Yes, sir. Yep, that's exactly right. Not doing what the Lord says. Absolutely. Good point. Anybody else have something you want to add to this? Good observations. People are thinking very, very critically this morning. That's good. All right, let's now go to question 2. The second part of question 2. Once God gave Joshua this assurance, what did Joshua immediately do after that? Verse 7. What did he do? Brother Woods, what did you say? You said it. He attacked them. Verse 7. So Joshua and all the people of war came with him. With him came upon them what? Suddenly. They didn't wait. They didn't think about it. They weren't like the other people. Remember when the spies came back and said, we can't do it, when God said, go do it? They didn't do it. No waiting. We go do it. God says we can do it. We got confidence in God. And Janice, can I take it back to evangelism? I want to take it back to evangelism. Jesus says in Matthew 28:20, I will be with you what? Always, even to the end of the age. Jesus says, go preach the gospel. He who believes it and is baptized will be saved. God told these people to go. Jesus told us to go. It's the same thing. The question is, are we going to be like these people? Are we going to go and trust in God that he's always going to be with us, and the weapons he's given us, the armor he's given us, the sword he's given us, it is good enough. It's the same parallel there. Do you see it? Theirs is a physical war. We're in a spiritual one. We're in a battle for souls. And we have to trust in God and go like he's told us to go. It's the same thing. Good point again, Janice. Anybody else have something you want to add to this? Question 2. Anything else? Yes, Harvey.
They say that we've got a plan for the future. And that was one of the reasons they put on their horses, because it made all these things unavailable
Right.
for the next battle.
Yep. Can't use it anymore. Man, I'm going to tell y'all something jokingly, Harvey. When I was doing this lesson, I never thought the crippling of the horses would have made such an impact on y'all. But I guess we got a lot of horse lovers here. That ain't me, but hey, I guess we in Tennessee. I should have known, right? I can't imagine how they would have done this in Kentucky. So let's now go to question 3. Which city did Joshua burn to the ground, and why was this city burnt to the ground? Which city was it? Hazor. Why did they burn this city? Because that's in verse 11. Verse 11 talks about Hazor getting burnt to the ground. Why this city being burnt up? Why? Yes, it's a chief city. It is the main city. And it's really the city that instigated all this. And they're going to suffer the biggest consequence. This city is going to be burnt down. Not only are the people going to be killed, but the city is going to be completely destroyed. Now, look at question 4. The other cities, as they go from Hazor and they conquer all these other cities, what happened to those cities? Were those cities burnt? What happened to the inhabitants? What happened to the possessions of those other cities in comparison to Hazor? Or maybe in contrast. What did y'all get for that? Did they burn them? They didn't burn those cities. They took them. They killed all the people. They took the spoils of war, but they didn't burn those cities. Why do you think they didn't burn those cities? We got to have somewhere to live when all this is over. Think about it. Okay, Hazor, that's very strategic, and that's specific. We're going to burn this city down. This is a wicked city, the chief city in this region. They instigated all this. We're going to destroy it. But these other cities, we're going to leave them. We're going to leave them. We're going to kill all the people, but once we're done, guess what we're going to do? We're going to come back, and, man, I got me a nice house ready to go. That's what's going on here. They take the spoils of war, and they're going to move into those homes. But there will be a blessing and a cursing with that. You understand that, don't you? Yes, it will be a blessing to once we're all done here and we're dividing up this land. We have homes already ready to go. Land already ready. But when you read the rest of your Old Testament from here on, particularly in Judges, what do you notice about the vacuum? And because they didn't completely kill all the people, like you said, what happens to some of these homes and things once Israel wants to go back and live in them again? And the people some of the Canaanites take them. This is why when you read Judges and other parts of the Old Testament, you find Israel battling these people over and over again. You see that? It actually leaves a huge vacuum. It's a blessing and a cursing. Because they didn't utterly wipe them out as time went on, they got to keep battling these people. And they actually, for a time, are going to share homes with these people. It's a back and forth kind of thing here. So it does leave a vacuum here. But they kill the people. They take the spoils of war. They only burn Hazor. Now, there's another question here, and this is verses 19 through 21. Who all entered into an alliance with Israel, and why didn't the others do the same? Look carefully at verses 19 through 21. Who all entered into an alliance with Israel? The Hivites of the who? That takes us back, doesn't it? So we have those people mentioned again. And specifically, when you look at it, what did those people do with Israel? I mean, we said they were kind of like the little brother of Israel. What did they do as far as the battles go with Israel? They took them all what? They took them all in battle, for it was of the Lord to harden whose hearts? Whose hearts? Who are we talking about there? Canaanites. So, I think you have Gibeon being attached to Israel. They're attached to Israel, and they're attached to them from here on. But I think that brings us to the second question. Why didn't the other people make an alliance with them? And Jeff, that actually takes us back to something you said earlier about these other people. Why did they not learn from the South? Why did they start this attack against Israel when the South did that? It didn't work out for them. Why didn't they do that? God hardened their hearts. How did God harden their hearts? I don't want. We actually did that last quarter. But how did the Lord harden their hearts? You should remember this from the last study last quarter. How is the Lord hardening their hearts? Through every victory that happens, these people stubbornly don't want to give it up. Do you understand that? These people do not want to give up their land. With every battle that's taken place and every victory Israel accomplishes, it only makes people other than the Gibeonites more stubborn. And they don't want to give it up. They don't want to give up this territory, so they're going to continue to fight. And they're going to continue to fight against God, and they're going to continue to lose against God. So you have people here who are stubborn. And no matter how many people around them go down, they don't want to give it up. You see that? They don't want to give up this territory. So the victories of Israel continue. The Gibeonites enter into an alliance, but nobody else does. Instead, they harden their hearts. The Lord hardens their hearts. So does anybody have anything before we get to the last half of these questions? Anything about these first five? Because they kind of go together. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Although practically, it's not like the Canaanites have a lot of good choices.
Yeah.
Because if they don't go out against Israel,
Yeah.
If they just pack up and abandon all of their houses and migrate, they're probably all going to be done.
And Israel's not going to make a treaty with them.
Yeah.
They're not going to make that mistake again.
So,
They're going to lose either way. I mean, they're destined for destruction. There's no way out of this, right? Let's say they say, well, we're going to sit here and not do anything. Well, they get wiped out. We go to battle. We get wiped out. We make a treaty with them. No, we did that once, and we knew that was wrong to do. They're going down either way. Either way, they're going down. So when you put it like that, I mean, they tried, but they were destined to fail because the Lord had had enough. Good point. Anybody else have something?
I don't know why they didn't run. I mean, why they just didn't flee. I mean, they needed one to win.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I mean, the Lord hardened their hearts, and they wanted to continue to fight. And again, I'll make this point, Jeff. It's not easy to leave your home. It's just not. It's not easy to leave your home. I think all of us as American citizens, even if there was a stronger nation coming against us and wanted to take our land, we would fight before we gave it up, right? We're not just going to easily give up our country, right? So I mean, maybe that's something to think about there. Anybody else? Yes. Yes. Yeah, it was inevitable. It was inevitable. It was going to happen. That's right. Now look at question 6. Let's conclude with this one. The Anakim. Who are the Anakim? Big people. Where did they settle? Even before then, though, Joe, because we're going to get there. But look at verses 21 through 23. Where were they? They were in Hebron, Debir, Anab, the hill country of Judah. Let me just make this point if y'all don't mind. I think when you study this carefully, you will see that the book of Judges is not like in chronological order, if that makes sense. Let me explain. When you read the first 2 chapters of Judges, I believe, you read about Judah going up against, the giants and things like that. You even hear about Caleb later on requesting to go against giants. I think what you got going on here is this right here is a summary, and then you hear about the details later. Does that make sense? I think when Judah goes against them, I think that's going to reference to what Caleb is going to do later. Caleb is going to lead Judah to go against the giants because he specifically wanted to do that. He says, let me have this hill country so I can fight against the giants. So I think here you have a summary, and then later on in Joshua and even parts of the Judges, you have the details of what's going on here in these verses in Joshua 11. I think that's what's going on here. But you have giants getting run out of their land. And what do they run to? Now that takes us to what Joe was saying. Where do they go? You have giants left in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. What territory is that of the nations of people that Israel fights throughout the Old Testament? That's the Philistine. Where did Goliath come from? He was Gath. He was a Philistine. There you go. So now you have, this is going to help other things make sense later on. You have giants left in Gaza, and that is going on the coast there. Gaza, Ashdod, Gath, that's going on the coast there. That's where the giants are going to be left. And later on, David is going to go out and fight Goliath, and the Bible specifically says that Goliath comes from Gath. So there you go right there. So you have the giants going to only left in the territory of the Philistines. The rest of them, verse 21, at the end of 21, Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. They were utterly destroyed. They only remained in the land of the Philistines. So let's stop right there. Question 7 we'll pick up there next time, and then we're going to go to lesson 9, okay? Good discussion, everybody. Thank you.